Hey everyone, Pugs here with two new reviews for y'all. Today I'm covering Grandma's Secret Recipe and The Scent of Money. I don't really have anything to tell y'all for this introduction. Like, these episodes, I suppose, give season 7? Well, they don't actually. They don't give anything to me, they just exist. That makes it sound like these episodes are gonna be bad. Maybe I shouldn't have said anything at all. Alright, this is getting to ridiculous levels of rambling. Let me just move on to the part where I say, as always, thank you to everyone watching the video today. Even if I don't always reply to comments, I do appreciate them, so keep them coming. And now, let's just get right into it. Seen before, Plankton's grandma. This time, the implications of that statement are entirely purposeful, because other than that, this is not a particularly enthralling episode, but I'll get to that. Right now, I'll finish saying that the introduction of this character is interesting because it allows us to see a different side of Plankton, as he's actually a pretty doting grandson towards his grandmother. Makes one wonder how Plankton treats his parents, if they're even still around. Perhaps his grandmother was even the one who raised him, who knows? Certainly not me. Grandma's Secret Recipe begins fine. Like, this beginning scene with Plankton and his grandma is fine, and I liked the moment where Plankton snapped at the nurse, showing his typical, snippy attitude in the midst of all this tenderness. However, maybe I should say faux tenderness, because when Plankton's grandma falls asleep, we see that perhaps Plankton is not the doting grandson that we've been presented with at all. Instead, he seems to just be using his grandma for a plan, which is rather in character for him. The next scene of Grandma's Secret Recipe takes place with SpongeBob bathing, and oh dear god, I'm having stuck in the ringer flashbacks. Give me a moment. Whew, I need to breathe. Oh my gosh, damn. Sorry. Don't know where that came from. Anyway, as I watch this scene, I'm also thinking about that one trailer for the first movie, so I guess let me focus on that memory instead, since that's a far more pleasant one. This scene also contains a track that I really like in the background of it, Salty Squid Jig 1, so that's most certainly a bonus. I also love how SpongeBob is interrupted from his playing by Plankton and how he just awkwardly walks down the stairs dripping wet. Like, that was pretty funny. Okay, so one thing about this episode that makes no sense to me is Plankton's plan. I mean, I understand his course of action, but what I don't understand is why we saw Plankton imagining himself tricking Mr. Krabs with his disguise, but then in reality he decides to go talk to SpongeBob? Like, it's not like he imagined his plan failing, so I'm confused why he switched gears here. I'm also not the biggest fan of how utterly clueless SpongeBob is here. Also, this plan is far more risky than just pretending to be any random grandma, because Plankton had to guess that SpongeBob wouldn't see right through him, which, for the purposes of this episode, he doesn't, miraculously. There's just entirely too much plot convenience? Contrivance? One or both of those, here. Like, really, this plot feels far more convoluted than Plankton simply walking into the Krusty Krab just like his daydream. It also feels reminiscent of Someone's in the Kitchen with Sandy, which already annoys me. And it makes me think of the complaint I had in season 6 about the same character interactions over and over again. Why are we having Plankton dress up as someone to trick SpongeBob for 2 different episodes that are pretty close to each other in production order? Why couldn't he have done this trying to trick a different character at the very least? And my last big problem with this episode, since that's how I'm organizing things this time it seems, is that it's kind of just really boring. Because I'm not laughing, and the plot is predictable. If I wanted to watch something with grandmas that didn't bore me, I'd watch Hoodwinked. This episode ain't that great piece of media, and I'm sitting here bored as SpongeBob and Plankton look through photo albums, drink tea, play cards, knit, and generally do nothing of substance for so long that I start wanting to yell at my screen, do something. At least we get some cameos from the woman from Band in Bikini Bottom and the old lady from Have You Seen the Snail. That was a nice touch. Eventually things finally become not boring when SpongeBob thinks that he's just shredded his grandma since Plankton's balloon decoy falls into the garbage disposal, and that was a pretty funny moment. But I hate that I had to slog through all of this slop just to get here. And then somehow Plankton's grandma gets into the safe with him, about ready to kick his ass, and let me tell you, I'm cheering her on. Yeah, so do I really need to say it? This episode is boring as hell, barely makes me laugh, and at times even irritates me because of how unskillfully contrived the plot is. Are you really surprised when I say that Grandma's Secret Recipe is being put in my okay tier with a score of 6 out of 10? Like, that tier was made for this episode, but the writing was honestly some mediocre tier quality shit. The episode just never annoyed or personally upset me to the degree it would need to reach that tier. So a low okay is where it's gonna go. Wow, another episode featuring my boy Gary? And so soon? This might just be my birthday present or something. Just kidding, my birthday's in March. Alright, I'll stop joking around now. In fact, let me get serious very quickly and say that I'm nipping this in the bud right now. I don't think that this is a Gary torture episode as I've seen bandied around. This episode is nowhere near the levels of A Pal for Gary or an episode I've yet to review, Pet Sitter Pat. I also don't think that SpongeBob is even remotely at the levels of incompetence and neglect as he was in A Pal for Gary. These are all things that I'll be discussing as I progress through this review, but I thought I'd just address them briefly right off the bat to give you a taste of what to expect. So, The Scent of Money begins with my favorite, SpongeBob and Gary moments. You know, this season has had quite a few of those so far, and I for one am glad for it, even if one of the episodes to include these moments is my second most hated episode of all time. This part of The Scent of Money also has a decent visual gag or two, which is always nice to see. And then I love how Mr. Krabs is just sitting around downtown just so he could sit in the free parking. That's honestly kind of real. But also, Bikini Bottom is such a walkable city that I always forget that Mr. Krabs can and does drive. The plot of this episode is interesting to me. Like, Gary being a walking coin magnet akin to Temple Run? Sure, why not? Did I date myself with a reference like that? Well, I shouldn't even say that. I'm not old by any stretch of the imagination. Whatever. Anyway, this episode is also really interesting because do my eyes deceive me? Am I seeing Mr. Krabs and Gary interact? As in two characters that very rarely interact, and so this episode is choosing to explore a new dynamic? Fucking yes, please. Now, it's true that this whole thing hinges on Gary being uncomfortable, but again, let me say that I don't think that this is Gary torture. See, when this episode says discomfort, I'm getting a vibe that Gary is, like, nauseous, not in pain. It's bad, but not capital B bad, you know what I mean? And honestly, I love seeing Mr. Krabs being so completely low down and horrible. I don't know, it's just the morbid fascination you get from watching people be morally reprehensible, but not in a visceral way. And I just like the visuals in this episode, from Gary's whole wiggle thing to the coins flying. SpongeBob's design in this episode also really stands out to me. It's just a breath of fresh air from some of the not so great styles and designs that I've been seeing as of late. I also like how even though this is rarely directly addressed, this episode indirectly shows how Mr. Krabs' money-mindedness can actually make him an awful businessman at times. Like, you're really gonna throw away your reputation and your customers just to steal loose change? Now, sure, when he goes to the arcade, the story's a bit different because there's an actual profit to be made there, but in this first scene at the Krusty Krab, you can really see how Mr. Krabs' greed only serves him in the short term. I like it. I like it a lot. As The Scent of Money progresses, I feel bad for my favorite little snail, but I still hold out hope that universal justice will be bestowed onto Mr. Krabs. And also, the struggle Gary faces in this episode is like the Great Snail Race or even grooming Gary, so that's why I don't really count this as torture, since it's more of an exhaustion thing for him. In the meantime, I liked all of the little work chores that Mr. Krabs sends SpongeBob on because of how increasingly ridiculous they get. And then I love when SpongeBob ends up painting the Krusty Krab because I just love a good makeover moment. And the interior and exterior that he comes up with look really fun and cool to me. And when SpongeBob comes across Mr. Krabs and Gary, he doesn't see anything wrong with what's happening, I surprisingly don't actually get frustrated. Maybe it's because the situation is a little less clear to SpongeBob than it is to us as the audience. Or maybe it's because it makes sense for him to believe Mr. Krabs as opposed to, say, making up stories about Gary that aren't based in reality. Either way, I'm not annoyed here. The way SpongeBob just slides out of frame here is hilarious to me as well. Once we reach the arcade bar, a flashback hits me at full force. Do y'all remember the Guinness O'Ripley's Extreme Arcade of World Record game on Nick.com from years ago? Please say someone does. I think the SpongeBob Community Flash Games collection has that one. I haven't looked over there in a while. But yeah, good times. Good times. Good nostalgic times. I miss those games. I mean, I feel like I mention them regularly enough that that's obvious. Anyway, one thing that I'm glad to see in this episode is that once SpongeBob catches wind of what's really going on, he's ready to retrieve Gary immediately. See, now this is exactly what we like to see, absolutely. I love when SpongeBob stands on business, and I love when he loves Gary even more than that. And I love the way that he goes straight to confront Mr. Krabs, like, go SpongeBob, go, I'm cheering you on. And this is very cathartic for me, and it makes me enjoy this episode even more. And also, it's just really fun to see SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs bicker like Mr. Krabs and Squidward in Can You Spare a Dime? In a way, this is almost relationship progression if you think about it. We then reach the end of the episode where Mr. Krabs gets his just desserts, since he ends up being hospitalized from all of the money that he, or, well, Gary, gathered as a tidal wave of coins crashes into him. I love how SpongeBob made sure to get him and Gary out of that situation immediately. And then I like that we get an answer to how Gary had this ability in the first place, and how this answer references SpongeBob's love for Merman and Barnacle Boy. That's a win-win for me. I love when we see multiple of SpongeBob's hobbies in one episode. It makes him seem more well-rounded. It's also cathartic to see that all of the change that Mr. Krabs collected is forced to go towards his hospital bill, but also, all of that change was only $2,000. I mean, that's definitely a lot of money, but this just goes towards my earlier point about Mr. Krabs' short-sightedness. If the Krusty Krab is truly a busy place, then Mr. Krabs is likely clearing $2,000 daily, so he really made some awful business decisions here, and that just really makes this ending come together even more for me. Clearly, I really enjoyed The Scent of Money. This episode was funny and entertaining, and it of course featured my favorite little dude, Gary, and I loved seeing SpongeBob stand up for Gary here, because first off, it was just great, but secondly, it also healed the rest of the wounds I'd sustained from a pal for Gary. I also liked that this episode featured a smaller cast, with only Mr. Krabs, SpongeBob, and Gary playing important roles. This made for some fun dynamics and interactions between any combination of the three. And so all of this is why I'm gladly putting this episode in my amazing tier, where it comes in with a score of 9.3 out of 10. As always, I'll be ending this video with some closing thoughts of mine. You know, I was thinking, and I feel like the reason that many people dislike The Scent of Money so much is for the same reason that many dislike One Course Meal, and that's Mr. Krabs. They don't like him doing such awful things, and I suppose that's fair. For me, because I'm not as attached, you could say, to Mr. Krabs being a good person, him doing reprehensible things in the name of greed is not something that I really care about. And let me specify that I'm saying in the name of greed. Yeah, Mr. Krabs didn't bother me too much in One Course Meal, but I did find his motivations lacking. In this episode, he at least had some sufficient motivation, so that's why I still like this episode even with his horrible actions. And it's nice to have a Gary episode that I really and truly love, because that does not happen very often, as sad as that is to say. And I think that's really all I can say for these closing thoughts today. So I suppose I'll go ahead and close things out here, and I'll see y'all in the next review.